Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. I just want to let everybody know that live stream is going on right now. What's going on, Spec Streaming? What's going on, Luke Chase, Mac Panther, T Mac? Tonight, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts regarding the protests that are going on regarding the murder of George Floyd. And when I take a critical examination of these protests, they were something that was going to happen because we have had a powder keg going on in this country, as I see it, ever since the days of Trayvon Martin. And that powder has been packing for the last, I say, 8 to 10 years since the acquittal of George Zimmerman. And that anger and frustration has been simmering and boiling, very similar to what I saw back in the 90s regarding the eruption as related to the Rodney King verdict, which acquitted those 4 police officers. Because what most people didn't know about the Rodney King verdict was there were numerous murders of black men by police officers in Los Angeles, and there were numerous black men and boys harassed by these police officers in Los Angeles. And when I saw a documentary chronicling all of those incidents of black men being shot and killed by the police, I started to see a lot of parallels between what happened in Los Angeles in the 80s that led up to the 1992 riots and what's going on right now. Because if you take a critical examination of the timeline after the murder of Trayvon Martin, you can see how this powder keg of dynamite was getting ready to be packed up, and eventually it wound up exploding after the murder of George Floyd, because your Obama administration did not do its job in making an effort to deal with George Zimmerman. Because your Obama administration did nothing to deal with George Zimmerman, this is what started the powder keg that eventually wound up exploding in these riots that are going on right now. Because your Barack Obama, he wanted to be the president of the United States of America and did not want to take a stand on civil rights. He decided to give George Zimmerman a pass and directed his Attorney General, Eric Holder, our so-called first black Attorney General, to do absolutely nothing. And because he did nothing, this is why we have this chaos going on right now. Because it is my personal belief, if Barack Obama had directed his Attorney General to file those federal civil rights charges against George Zimmerman, we would not have Donald Trump as the president of these United States, and we wouldn't have these riots going on right now. And in addition, we would have saved numerous lives of young black men, because the United States government would have drawn a line in the sand as related to how black men's rights would be interpreted by the law. And once he would have established that boundary, what would have happened was it would have put all of these rednecks, racist, and white supremacist and race soldiers on notice and let them know that the federal government was going to establish a standard as related to the law and how it treated black men. But because your first black president wanted to be the president of the whole United States and wanted to protect white interests, this is why we have this powder keg that has been packing down for the last, I say, 8 years since the murder of Trayvon Martin. Because with the death of each black man and the lack of inaction by the state governments to prosecute these rogue police officers and these beta male, what I call them, suburban terrorists like George Zimmerman, because no one wanted to put these guys and let them know what the standard was. This is what led to the gunpowder packing down tighter and tighter. And the actions of your second attorney general further packed that powder down because the egregious actions by your Loretta Lynch regarding the case of Eric Garner, these were the ones that extremely disgusted me because this woman who had the power to file those federal civil rights charges against Daniel Pantaleo, she just let the clock run out and then handed the football over to the Trump administration, which did absolutely nothing, which further packed more gunpowder down onto this powder keg. And this powder keg that was already packing tight with gunpowder, it just got worse as we transitioned from the Obama presidency to the Trump presidency. And with this COVID-19 pandemic, we got a further packing down of this gunpowder because with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had the media going out here stoking fear. And this fear is the thing that is leading to the creation of a lot of this anger, because a lot of this anger we're seeing outside, a lot of that was simmering and boiling for a while. But what further exacerbated that anger was the fact that we had all of these municipalities deciding to close their so-called non-essential businesses, and we had 40 million Americans out of work. So we had a powder keg on top of a powder keg, and it just took one little spark to create an explosion. And this is something that when I saw many of these state governments closing all of these non-essential businesses out here, I said to myself that this could go really bad if we have an incident where a black man is shot and killed by these police, or there's an incident where a black man is brutalized by the police. And that was my own analysis from a worst case scenario when I was looking at this COVID-19 pandemic, because I looked at how bad this situation was. And it's scary that this just happened. And I just said to myself, the worst case scenario I came up with in my mind came to fruition. And it's scary to see that worst case scenario coming to fruition right now. Because I said it to myself when I was hearing about, we have a black man who is murdered by the police or shot or brutalized by the police. We're going to have a riot go on because you have all of these people out here who, again, are out of work. They're simmering and boiling in anger and frustration. And this would be the spark that would set off a riot. And it's just scary to see that worst case scenario coming to fruition right in front of me. And it's really terrifying to see that worst case scenario coming to fruition, because I also saw the powder keg getting worse when I looked at policies being put into place by many of these left-leaning politicians. They just kept piling on the restrictions, like with your Gretchen Whitmer, who telling people they couldn't buy seeds, these one-way lanes in these stores. People were already stressed to the max. I mean, when you've got 40 million people or 20% of the country unemployed, when you've got people worried about how they're going to pay their bills, and when you've got people who are about to lose their businesses and their livelihoods, packed on top of Black people who have already lived like this and live with that fear and frustration every day, eventually all of that fear out here, this fear turns into anger. And all it takes, again, is one spark to turn all of that anger into rage. And this is the scariest thing about this whole situation, is that it took this one incident and we now see all of that anger exploding all around us, because this is all of this anger regarding Black people as related to all of the discrimination they suffered with the murders of all of these Black men and the inability to get justice, and with all of these whites and non-Blacks as related to their frustrations regarding the economy. So we have two situations going on here, and most of these politicians, they're completely out of touch as related to dealing with all of this anger. And this anger, for most Black people, as relates to this criminal justice system practically just denying Black men justice for and letting these rogue race soldiers go on a kill spree as related to Black men. Because this Derek Chauvin, he was not a police officer as I see it. He was not following police procedure as I see it, because to put your knees and the full weight of your body down on a man's neck and put it there for over 8 minutes, that's first degree murder as I see it, because there's clear malice of forethought and a willful intent to kill an individual, because this individual was already handcuffed. And according to police procedure, once the individual is handcuffed and restrained, that individual is supposed to be placed in a cage squad car. And I find it interesting that I just watched an episode of WWE SmackDown where they did a staged incident with Jeff Hardy, where they showed him being handcuffed and they showed him being put in the back of a cage police car according to procedure. But this Derek Chauvin, he doesn't choose to do this. Instead, he chooses to put the full weight of his body on this Black man's neck and practically choke that man out in front of all of these people. And he did that, again, with that malice of forethought, because he believed he was going to be protected by this police union, and he believed he was going to be protected by this group of disingenuous politicians. So don't let that mayor fool you with his, oh, he should be charged. This is the man who runs the executive branch of the Minneapolis city. So this man, like your Bill de Blasio here as related to Eric Garner, he could easily direct his district attorney to file those criminal charges, and he could have easily directed him to do that almost immediately. Instead, this wishy-washy beta male mayor and that wishy-washy beta male district attorney further stoked the flames on an explosion by making these statements. And they made these statements because they were too cowardly to stand up for what is right. So when people look at that mayor of Minneapolis and talk about, oh, how he took a stand, he was not taking a stand. He was being extremely disingenuous. He was being extremely dishonest. And what he wanted to do was play the nice guy role and play the passive part is related to making a statement to appear to be on the side of the protesters, but aggressively behind the scenes, he was out here, excuse me, was out here looking to find a way to give Derek Chauvin and his three friends a pass. Because in order to understand what this mayor is doing, you have to understand the game of political chess that is being played. And if you looked at what your Attorney General Loretta Lynch did, and you look at what Bill de Blasio did here in New York City as related to Eric Garner, you can see the political chess game being played, because this political chess game was played for back in 2016 as related to Eric Garner with Bill de Blasio here. And he decided instead of filing those charges against your Daniel Pantaleo, he ran the clock out and then decided to just give this man a pass and then eventually lead to him being fired after he waited till after your Loretta Lynch quit her job and then decided to file these proceedings in order to get this guy fired. So he really was another disingenuous leftist politician who wanted to passively, again, make it look like he was out for justice, but aggressively was looking to protect these rogue race soldiers. And the same thing is going on here, the same game of political chess. And Black people need to get on code as related to dealing with this game of political chess, because what's being done right here is they're separating Derek Chauvin, making him look like he's the ultimate villain. Then what they want to do is then pile up the charges and then go out here and then try to find a way to acquit him of a crime he actually committed, because there was a crime committed right there in front of us. This was a clear case of excessive force, and they did not have to go out here and attack this man this way over a alleged counterfeit $20 bill. Now, when I take a critical examination of that part of the case, that's where I see not only the racial violence these police officers participated in, but I see the racial profiling that went on before that got all of this started. Because this Arab store owner, they were participating in racial profiling when they made that allegation that your George Floyd was going out here with this counterfeit $20 bill, and they were looking to go out here and put this man in jail over something he had no control over. I mean, sometimes these people, they sit there, they come up with these racist ideas regarding Black men, and these supposed teenagers who were working in the store had a racist idea regarding George Floyd. Now, George Floyd went into the store to pay for the cigarettes. He had his money ready, and they're going to tell him that his money is fake, and then he leaves the store. And that should have been the end of it. But these people in this Arab store, they wanted to escalate things. They wanted to escalate things, and they decided to call the police on this man. Now, I have to ask the critical question: would they have called the police on a white man? Would they have called the police on an Asian man? Would they have called the police on another Arab man? I don't believe they would have called the police on any of those people. No, I believe that they would have taken their money, especially in the case of a white man, and they wouldn't have done anything on him. So when I look at that whole thing, because I've run into that many times in my own life, and I clearly saw the racial profiling there. Now, I remember back in 1989, when I was 16 years old, I ran into the same situation that your George Floyd ran into when I went into a Carvel on 167th Street. Now, I was getting ice cream from my family. They had asked me to go pick some ice cream up for them, and I had a $10 bill. And this clerk decides that my money is fake. He didn't even really take an examination of the bill. He just decides, oh, this is a fake bill. And he just did that for the sake of doing it, because he didn't like the idea of a Black boy coming in here with money. And that just shows, again, the racial profiling that went on with me over 30 years ago. And that's why I can clearly say that George Floyd was being racially profiled in that store, because I've run into that myself. And in many stores I went into back in the 80s, they would, take your dollar bill and hold it up in the air to see if it's counterfeit. And again, all of this is done regularly to Black customers because they believe Black customers steal and Black customers are trying to get over on them. And that really, again, makes no logical sense when you really think about it, because to call the police on a man over an alleged counterfeit $20 bill, that you cannot allege that this man was willfully and intentionally trying to rip you off, because some of these bills wind up processing through these ATMs, especially the ones in these foreign-owned stores. And a lot of these bills, they just get passed through the system. There's nothing anybody can do about it. And these guys, they wanted to say, oh, he was the one behind this. And again, calling the police on this man for a crime that never happened and escalating a situation into something that led to this man's death. That's why I hold that store partially responsible for the murder of this man, because if it wasn't for them going out here and projecting this racist stereotype onto this Black man, George Floyd would be alive today. And I believe that these racist officers, when they also came out here, they wanted to get even with George Floyd because they saw a Black man driving a late model Mercedes SUV. And again, seeing that image of a Black man with success, this also made these racist officers angry, because the whole idea of seeing a Black man driving a car he wasn't supposed to have, having money he wasn't allegedly supposed to have, they wanted to go out here and they wanted to make this Black man pay for a crime he did not commit, and they wanted to make him suffer. So when I look at this situation, again, they wanted to hurt George Floyd. And again, it was a group of racists out here looking to project their ideas onto George Floyd. And they wanted to use those ideas they projected onto George Floyd in order to hurt him, because he was out here and he was somebody they wanted to make pay. So this was in many ways a lynching, and it was a lynching not only by those white racist police officers, but it was also a lynching by that store owner. And it was a lynching by the Asian officer who stood there and let this happen. And I also, when I look at this, that white guy, Derek Chauvin, yes, he is guilty of murdering George Floyd, but those accomplices are equally guilty of allowing this to happen, because those officers, like that Black female supervisor in the case of Eric Garner, they could have stopped this officer from doing harm to this man. And they could have stepped in because they clearly knew what procedure was. They knew the difference between right and wrong. And all of them could have come out here and took a stand for proper law enforcement and proper police procedure. But they did not want to stand for proper police procedure. They did not want to stand for quality law enforcement. Instead, they stood up for terrorism, and they supported this urban terrorist, suburban terrorist, as I see him, in terrorizing this Black man and participating in the willful and intentional murder he wanted that this Derek Chauvin wanted to participate in. So they helped participate in this murder, and I believe they should be equally charged for going out here and participating in this murder, because that's what we saw on that video. We saw a murder, and this is one of the most egregious things about this whole thing is we all saw a murder, and America is sitting there, many Americans are sitting there in denial and sitting there wondering, how did this happen? Not understanding that when you start to connect the dots, as related to this whole powder keg that has been going on for the last 8 years since the murder of Trayvon Martin. And you connect all the dots to the anger and frustration with the Black community, and you correlate those dots with the COVID-19 pandemic practically ravaging our economy. You can see how this inspired. I mean, any critical thinker can see how this happened. And as I see it, the bigger picture, this Derek Chauvin, it looks like these people are still trying to give him a pass, because that third-degree murder charge just shows, again, the disingenuousness of the district attorney, and it shows the disingenuousness of that mayor. Because, again, that mayor could have easily, as the executive branch of the city of Minneapolis, shut a lot of this down by going out here and announcing that his police commissioner, in addition to firing this man, have him arrested, and could have minimized a lot of that property damage. But because these beta males were just so weak and so soft and so afraid of alienating all of these white supremacists out here, they decided to try to find a way to give him a pass. And like George Zimmerman, they're still trying to find a way to give Derek Chauvin a pass, even though, like Daniel Pantaleo, this officer was clearly somebody who should not have been on the force. And again, with 18 previous complaints against him, this man should not have remained on the job for over 19 years. I mean, that's one of the most egregious things as related to this whole case, is that this racist was allowed to remain on the force for over 19 years. And people like on the left, like your Amy Klobuchar, were willing to give this man a pass for participating in numerous violations of procedure. And again, just shows us how messed up our law enforcement is, and shows us how our law enforcement is just a complete and utter, it's just an utter shambles. Because for us to sit there and just give this Daniel Pantaleo a pass, and Mike Bloomberg gave Daniel Pantaleo a pass, these individuals should have been terminated years ago. And it looks like YouTube does not like what I'm saying, because they're slowing down my stream, but that's what YouTube does. And again, they don't like hearing the truth regarding this how the situation came to be. But the situation sadly came to be, again, it was a powder keg, and no one wants to acknowledge the foundations of that powder keg. And this powder keg, again, is not something people should be taking for granted, because this situation, it can get worse. And if people don't really take things seriously, they don't know how bad things are going to get. I mean, I look over at CNN, where they're practically wrecking the place, and that just shows you, again, the frustration that is going on out here, because people out here, they are extremely frustrated. They are extremely angry. And people just don't know. People in these companies who are running things, they don't know how angry people are, because again, we have stoked all of this fear with COVID-19, and now that fear is turning into anger, and that anger is turning into rage. And that rage is something everybody, especially these politicians, really need to take a critical look at, because that rage is due to people believing that they cannot get any justice in our American criminal justice system. And people were denied that justice all during the Obama years. And all of that denial has turned into frustration for Black Americans. And that frustration is turning into anger for many white Americans, because they see themselves being denied their rights as related to this COVID-19 pandemic. And that is what is leading to this firestorm burning. And this firestorm, again, is not going to be put out until start listening to people, because that's the big problem I'm seeing with this whole, with these protests. People believe they are not being heard by their government. People believe that their government is not concerned for them. And people feel disconnected from their government. And they feel like their government is on one side of the world doing whatever it wants, but it is not serving we the people. So people are angry at their government because they don't feel that their government is looking out for their best interest. I mean, we can't, people are just angry out here because they look at the murder of George Floyd. Um, Thank you, O'Shea Duke Jackson on the stream. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. But people out here, they are extremely angry, and people do not know how deep that anger goes out here as related to people. Because when you mess up people's economic situation and you mess up their ability to make a living, that makes people really anxious. That makes people really nervous. That makes people uneasy. And again, that's adding more of that gunpowder onto a powder keg. And that powder keg now is exploding. And sadly, you have people still trying to add more logs to this fire, like that district attorney who made that cowardly statement, and like these people out here who, like your Donald Trump, who really are not helping anything. I mean, he did one thing by saying the Department of Justice was going to investigate it, which was a good thing. But then he made that tweet, which really showed that he just does not understand. Thank you, Veg48, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. And if you guys want to donate to the Cash App, you can donate to the Cash App. I'm going to leave a link to that in the chat. But that tweet really that was just adding more fuel to the fire. Got another connection, unstable, but they just don't understand what's going on here. I mean, Trump really, I don't think he understands the gravity of this situation. He doesn't understand that, you know, this is just it's just a really bad situation, and they really don't understand that when you have a situation like this is the type of stuff that leads to because this type of civil unrest is not something you want to take for granted, because this is the type of civil unrest that can practically do some serious damage, because we're seeing people going to these state houses, and we even had the White House on lockdown. And again, this is all because you have a destabilized economy, and when people's economic situation is messed up, you have a time bomb that's just, it's a scary situation. But this whole thing with what happened in Minneapolis, this was building for over 8 years. And again, that's very similar to what happened in LA. I mean, LA, there were people being killed all the time, black men being killed. And eventually you just reach that boiling point. And we reached that boiling point, just a couple of days ago with the murder of George Floyd. Because George Floyd, again, when I look at George Floyd, I see myself. I mean, I have been in that situation numerous times. I mean, I talked about that with the Carvel back in '89, and I've been where George Floyd is, and George Floyd is my age. I'm 46 years old. I could have been George Floyd, and it's scary because I think about him, and I could have been George Floyd because I've been in that situation. I could have been Ahmaud Arbery because I've been in that situation. And now when I look at those men, I thank God that I got out of those situations in one piece. I thank God that my father and my brother trained me in the unwritten social rules as related to how to navigate these situations. And I thank God that I was able to get through those situations, because I look at George Floyd again and I see myself, and I mean, it just shows you how precious life is, and how a black man's life, you know, it can be here today and gone tomorrow. Because when you are a black man out here, when you step outside of your door, or even if you're inside of your house in some cases, you wake up every day knowing that every day could be your last day on this earth. Thank you, Mad Lion, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. But you wake up the last day you are alive on this earth, and that you live in the fear, knowing that you could possibly die today, tomorrow, or just any time during that day. It could be the last moment of your life. And that's one of the things that makes me want to stay close to the living God, because the whole thing is you don't know where your end is coming in this United States. I mean, you could just be going to the store and you could wind up dead just by going into a store and just doing something simple like George Floyd did in handing a guy a dollar bill for some cigarettes or some ice cream. And the next minute, you've got police coming after you. And again, that just shows us how little America has changed as related to civil rights here. And that is one of the most egregious things about the Barack Obama presidency, is how little things has changed as related to civil rights. Even with a alleged black president, we got no change as related to civil rights, and he could have easily done something to prevent all of those murders from men, from Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Eric Garner. He could have prevented all of those deaths by simply drawing a line in the sand. Moreover, he could have protected his party and destroyed Donald Trump and cut him off at the knees by just implementing that policy. Because had he implemented those policies, that would have stopped the Trump presidency before it even got started. I mean, Trump would not have had any momentum to build had he done something, but because he did nothing, this is what created the situation we have right now. And these riots, what's really interesting to me is they want to make it look like a black people are out here doing the rioting. Thank you, G 2786. He says, "Thank God you're still here, man. It wasn't your time. You're all right." The straight heterosexual American black man, yeah, he is an endangered species, and he is attacked from all sides. When you're a heterosexual black man, you are being attacked. Now, I learned this at an early age, not just by these white race soldiers, but you have people in your own community against you. You have your own black women against you. So thank you, Monument Films, for the super chat. You have everybody against you. When you are a regular heterosexual, decent brother, I mean, you practically have a huge target on your back. And this is something that many, again, like I said in last week's live stream, many black boys don't know, because the baby boomer generation of black men, they bought into this silly idea of individualism. They bought into this silly idea of integration. They bought into this retarded idea of being a part of a rainbow and being a part of the great American melting pot. They bought into these ideas, and they did not set up infrastructure to help teach the young generation, my generation, and the next generation about how dangerous this world is. And they really led to a lot of the deaths as well. I also hold those baby boomers equally accountable for these deaths out here, because those baby boomer black people, they were so caught up in the idea of integration and being post-racial, they didn't understand how dangerous things were for the next generation. Because if it wasn't for me learning by watching my family members, like my father and my brother, I wouldn't have gotten those unwritten social rules. And a lot of guys out here, again, I'm seeing them just dropping dead left and right and being murdered left and right, because a lot of them suffer for a lack of knowledge, and they're not being taught. And again, this riot, as I see it, thank you, Kelcat 3 Stacks, for the super chat. But I look at the whole, they want to make it look like it's all black people. But when I look at the video of these people who are out here, let's quote unquote protesting and looting, I see primarily white and non-black faces doing the looting, and I see black people protesting. That's another thing people have to differentiate as related to these protests. It's black people and some whites and non-blacks protesting, but most of the looting is being done by these whites, Hispanics, and non-blacks, and they're the ones doing a lot of that looting. So when I look at the video of the looting, I don't see black faces doing the looting, but the mainstream media, they want to push a narrative as related to the rioting and make it look like it's a black thing. But these are opportunists looking to capitalize on the situation. They're not really interested in justice. They're looking to capitalize on the situation, either to one, push their agenda, or two, looking to get some free stuff out of this. And that's what they want to do. They want to make it look like they're on the side of so-called justice, but they're not actually out to get justice. That's the whole disingenuous thing on people on that side over there, who are some of them. They aren't really out to get justice, because again, we could have had justice with George Zimmerman and Michael Brown. We could have had justice with them, but nobody wanted justice because there's this covert contract between these politicians and these race soldiers. And the covert contract is, you give me a pass for my police brutality, and I'll give you a pass in the next election. That's the dirty trick that's going on right now. And that's what that mayor and that's what that governor are doing right now to people, because they can't see the political chess being played. And because they can't see the political chess being played, they think that, oh, all these protests, that means that they're going to actually do something. When again, it's political chess. And what they want to do is make it look like they're going to try to do something. But people, as I see it, they may not be able to play that chess move, because people right now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, are so angry and so frustrated and so filled with rage that the political chess moves may practically blow up in their face, because the way they have handled the COVID-19 pandemic has created this tinderbox and powder keg. And if you push people too far, you're going to push people to the point where, when people have nothing to lose, that's when they become the most dangerous. So a lot of these politicians, they don't understand the games that they're playing. I mean, they do not understand how bad this situation is. And you have opportunists like your Joe Biden thinking that they can capitalize. You have people like Donald Trump who are nonchalantly not taking it seriously and not understanding that, again, when you have people being evicted from their homes with no job to go back to, and nothing to lose, you have an extremely dangerous situation. And this is a situation that is exacerbated by race, because you have a problem. Because when I looked at that Michigan protest with Gretchen Whitmer and the games that she was playing, she with those white protesters, she was calling them she was calling them racist and hate. She doesn't understand what's going on here. And again, this is a powder keg, and this is not something you want to take for granted, because again, people out of work, no money, 40 million people out of work. This is just the worst case scenario getting started. And if we don't get our economy back in order, we're going to have an even worse situation going on. So I look at the big picture of this, and when I look at those protesters, again, I saw a perfect storm. I mean, back when I saw the COVID-19 lockdowns happening, and when I saw those lockdowns starting to happen, I immediately said to myself, worst case scenario, if we get a shooting of a black man by a police officer, or a black man out here where he loses his life, we're going to have an explosion. And sadly, I hated to see that come to pass. And I really hated to see this man lose his life. I really hated seeing that, because what we witnessed in front of us, there is no excuse for it. There is no justification for it. What we saw happen in front of us, was a murder. We saw a murder transpire in front of us, and that murder was over a lie. I mean, a lie told on a black man, and a lie that has been told on black men from where I see it, and your George Floyd saw it for over 30 years. I mean, ever since I was, I say 12, 13 years old, and my father was giving me an allowance. I mean, these people would go out of their way to scrutinize your money if you were a black boy. I mean, if you had a $20 bill or a $10 bill, I mean, they always held your money up in the air to see if it was real, and they would always question your money, and that's something we had to deal with. And it's really, again, this is something we dealt with for over 30 years. And what's really troubling is these people in this Arab store thought they were going to take it to another level by calling the police on this man. And calling the police on a man just for that just shows how little they regarded his life. Because if he had again left the store, there was no need to escalate things. I mean, there was no crime committed. There was no crime at all because nobody knows where this money came from. It's not like this man had a printing press in his house. I mean, not like he willfully intentionally did this. And there was nothing. I mean, because these bills circulate in banks, they circulate in ATMs, they circulate everywhere. So there's no way that anybody could have known what that dollar was. And again, this store owner, they created this firestorm by doing this to Mr. Floyd. I mean, practically setting that man up for murder by these race soldiers. And again, I hold them equally accountable, and they should be held liable in a civil lawsuit for participating in the murder of that man as I see it. I mean, I look at this whole situation from the panoramic perspective, and I can see where many have done wrong, and I can see that we may be in for an extremely long, hot summer, because when I look at this incident and the riots that are going on, I look at what happened here in Central Park with that Amy Cooper. I see time bombs getting ready to go off left and right because our country is in a very, very vulnerable state. I mean, it's in a very vulnerable state. I mean, that situation with Amy Cooper is what leads to men like George Floyd getting murdered, and white women like Amy Cooper. What they do is they call the police, tell this lie, and this could have ended equally as bad here in New York as related to your Mr. Cooper here. No relation. He could have easily wound up in the exact same situation as George Floyd had, that Amy Cooper managed to get the police involved. And again, I look at the big picture as related to the United States, and we had the first spark, as I see it, with Ahmaud Arbery. We had the second spark with Mr. Cooper and Amy Cooper, and then we had the flame start with George Floyd's murder. So this is a very, very, very tenuous situation, and I believe that the people in the state governments, the people in Washington, they are so disconnected that they don't see how tenuous and tense these situations are and how dangerous things are getting. Because when I look at this, again, I look at this pandemic and how it has devastated our economy, and how we have, again, 20% of America, 40 million people out of work. We have a powder keg getting ready to explode. And again, worst case scenario is civil war. Best case scenario is we have another depression. And this is something people aren't thinking critically about, because we don't have a qualified president of the United States in the White House, or Donald Trump. Again, he has no experience in public administration. He has no experience as related to creating public policy. And he has nothing outside of emotion. And one of the big problems I see from the pandemic all the way to the last 8 years is we've had a lot of people running on emotion. We've had a lot of people in their feelings. And again, people when they're emotional and then you stoke those fires like the media has with the pandemic as related to panic, they have created a perfect storm. And they don't understand that that perfect storm is not something you want to be in. And that perfect storm is getting ready to happen sooner rather than later if they don't find a way to calm the American people. Because the big problem I'm seeing, not just on the federal level with Donald Trump, but on the state levels as well, is leadership. And most of these people, they're not looking to lead, they're looking to go out here and top each other. And topping each other is a beta male thing. And that's something I saw as related to these lockdowns and the strictness of the lockdowns. They kept trying to escalate things and escalate and more frustrated. And we started to see, again, that the sparks with that Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan when she started telling people they couldn't buy seeds for Easter, and that was another spark, and that's when we started to see these militia types, these racist militia types, heading out here with their guns, and we saw that because she escalated things and didn't understand. You need to back up. You need to chill. You need to stop putting restrictions on people because Americans aren't Chinese. Americans, when you push Americans, they eventually start pushing back. And when they push back, it's not pretty. This is something that many of these people, especially in these left-leaning states, they don't really understand about American people. American people, when you keep pounding and compounding restrictions on people, people get frustrated about them. And then when you take their jobs away and their ability to make a living, that makes them even more frustrated. And then when they can't get unemployment, it makes them even more frustrated. And again, you've stoked these fires starting with the fear as related to the pandemic. And then you have this anger brewing. And then you have an incident like this, which turns that anger into rage. And that rage is what we are seeing in Minneapolis and all across the country. People aren't just angry about the murder of George Floyd. They are angry because they see their rights being taken away, and they see a government looking like it wants to try to further oppress them. And they are angry because they believe that the government is not serving the people. They believe that the government is serving itself, and they don't see, again, any solutions coming from those who they elected with the ballot box. And because they don't see solutions coming from those who elected them with the ballot box, that's what's got most of these people so angry. And the murder of George Floyd makes them believe that the police aren't out to serve the people. They are out to serve themselves. More and more fragmented and more, it's not really coming together to work in the best interest of the people. And people are just, they're not in a good place right now. I mean, this is a very, very perilous time. And as I see it, everybody, I said it during the live stream I did regarding coronavirus, we need to have people out here starting to really, especially in government, take a chill pill, because these restrictions they are putting on people as they are out of work is adding to the frustration. And that I said back then that if they push things too far, there are more American people than there are law enforcement. There are, in fact, more American people than our United States military. And if you push too far, you're going to have a revolt. And that's not what you really want as related to a big picture. That's the whole thing that the government doesn't understand, local, state, and federal, is how fragile things are. And they don't understand that this fragility this is not a good place you want to be in. And with the really, as I see it, inept and unqualified president in the executive branch, he really doesn't understand, how fragile things are. I mean, he doesn't understand that this country is not in a good place right now because again, when you have all of these people out of work and then you have all of these people scared for their lives and their livelihoods, because people's livelihoods are why people are angry, and that's when that's just it's not a good thing. And people, and again, the people who are running our government at local, state, and federal are not understanding how bad things are. They're just sitting there, oh yeah, it's just a riot. It's not just a riot. It's in Minneapolis. It's not just protests in New York. This is something. This is something that is worst case scenario. It could turn into something worse. And again, your politicians, they just show us that they're not ready to lead. And I look at your November elections, and I believe that we're going to see major change because people, they look at these leaders and they're saying, look, they could not handle business as related to this pandemic. They couldn't handle business as related to George Floyd, and they failed we the people. So we the people really need to start thinking about the leaders we choose, because it's clear to me they're not leading as related to our country. I mean, our country has been rudderless, as I see it, for the last 10 to 11 years. I mean, I even go back further with George W. Bush. We really have not had a president set a direction for the country. We have not really had a president set vision for the country. I mean, we get from George W. Bush, we got, oh, we're going to declare war on terror, which was just blurry. And really, we didn't really accomplish anything with that. And then we got Obama's hope and change, which really didn't give anybody hope and change. And then we got Donald Trump's Make America Great Again. But none of those things really are helping the average American have that, get that American dream, or really put together a set of policies to help the average American. And when I look at things, you know, as related to these riots that went on in Minneapolis, they show us that, again, our government isn't listening to we the people. They're just so busy listening to themselves, and they don't really want to hear us. I mean, here in New York, Bill de Blasio, he doesn't hear anything that anybody has said, and he's just going on his own thing. Andrew Cuomo's going on his own course, and they're not listening to the people out here who are struggling. The same thing in Minneapolis, where these police have been beating up Black people for years, not listening that we need police reform. We need to deal with these race soldiers, and we need to deal with this culture that creates and recruits these race soldiers. And we need to get these people out of law enforcement, because they're not about enforcing the law. They are all about terrorizing Black people, and they are enabled and supported not just by white racists, but they're also enabled and supported by many of, as we saw, that Asian officer, that the Hispanics, and they are enabled by all those people. So they enable all of that. That's something people aren't really thinking about, but it was something I thought about when I was writing my novel, A Temptation of John Haynes, because when I wrote that story, I wrote a whole sequence talking about racial profiling and how it relates to Black men and Black women, and how it drives a wedge between Black men and Black women. And the only way to stop that culture is to cut it off at the head, because once you cut off the head, the whole body falls. And that's why, again, I'm just angry at Barack Obama, because Barack Obama did not understand that if he had cut off George Zimmerman and filed those charges, he would have cut the head off of those racist and white supremacists, and that body would have fallen. And that would have saved a lot of Black lives and showed the world that Black lives mattered to the first Black president. But because they didn't matter to our first Black president, that's why we saw the murder of George Floyd almost a decade after the murder of Oscar Grant and Trayvon Martin, because this guy was just too much of a coward to set that policy and set that policy as related to establishing a standard for civil rights for black men and black people. And that's why it has gotten worse instead of better in this country, because he didn't give black men hope and change. And that's why cities are burning all across this country and burning all in all across the United States, because these politicians don't want to take a stand on anything. All they want to do is go out here and try to please these white constituents, whether they be the left or on the right, and not try to stand up for anything as related to basic human and basic civil rights. Because what many of them don't understand is these same people who go out here, these race soldiers who go out here and kill black people, eventually they get tired of killing black people and terrorizing black people. And what they do is they start going after other people. That's what people don't understand about suburban terrorists. When you allow a suburban terrorist to continue going on, you may think you have a covert contract with them, but what they do is they continue to escalate their terror campaigns, because the Ku Klux Klan, back in the days of Jim Crow, they didn't just terrorize black people, they also terrorized Italians, they terrorized Jews, they terrorized Greeks, they terrorized people of the alphabet community. This terrorist group, they only want to see your white males on top. Your Ku Klux Klan and your race soldiers, they all follow the same white supremacist agenda. And they believe that because they have the right skin and the might, they have the right to oppress everyone. So they start with black people, but then they branch out into other people. So that's why you have to push back against these suburban terrorists. They hate everyone and they want to oppress everyone, and they want to keep everybody at the bottom because they're scared that if people rise, they won't be on the top of their smooth world. And if they're not on the top of their smooth world, it's that insecurity that has them terrified about being overthrown. That's the great fear of your white supremacists, and that's why they participate in their acts of violence. They participate in their acts of violence because they are insecure about themselves. They are scared of black people rising, because in their smooth world, as long as the black man is at the bottom of the world, they are comfortable. And if the black man shows that he can rise to another level, they start getting scared. And that's what we saw happen with George Floyd. And again, I believe his motive for his murder was because he represented a black man who was not fitting into their smooth world. Here was a clean-cut brother driving a late model Mercedes SUV, had his own money, and that Arab store owner saw somebody who was a threat to them because of who he was. And because they saw who he was, that's what got them upset about George Floyd. And when those police officers rolled up on George Floyd and saw him in that late model Mercedes SUV, they also got angry because, again, here's a black man that does not fit their narrative, does not fit into their smooth world, and they needed to create a story around him. Like the store owner created the story that George Floyd was drunk, and these police officers followed that narrative because they needed that story in order to find a justification to arrest him and brutalize him. Because this is something I learned when I was working at the City College Science Library, is that when you don't fit their narrative, they start creating narratives around you, and they use those narratives as justification to do harm to you. So when I was working at the City College Library, I was what I am right now, wearing the same type of shirts that I'm wearing right now. And this head librarian, he did not like the idea of a clean-cut, intelligent brother working in his library because that did not fit his smooth world. And he looked for a way to get me out of his library because I was not fitting his narrative, and he would project things onto me, like he didn't like my hair, and he talked about, oh, something's wrong with your hair. Is one time tried to make a slick comment about it, and then they made the accusation I was sleeping at the desk when I wasn't sleeping at the desk because you can't sleep standing up. So a lot of these racists, they create narratives around Black people and use those as justifications to do harm to them. And that's exactly what I believe happened to George Floyd. Is the store owner created a narrative around him, the police officers created a narrative around him, and they used that as a justification to go out here and commit the murder of George Floyd, a murder that we clearly see does not fit anything as related to police procedure, because to put the full weight of your body on a man's neck, that is murder, plain and simple. There is no excusing it. There is no justifying it. I mean, we see from the video, he put up no fight. He put up no resistance. And it was a good union job, but the whole thing is I couldn't keep it because of this racist who was just a coward. That's all it was for our side of the fan. But that's just what they do. They don't want to see Black men in certain places because in their place, in the smooth world of the white racist, whether they be on the left or the right, all they want to see is Pookie and Ray Ray. They want to see a sagging pants Negro. They want to see a street slang talking jive time Negro because that makes them feel comfortable about their place in the world. They don't like the idea of seeing an intelligent. So a lot of these racists out here, they don't like that idea of Black manhood. They don't like the idea of seeing an intelligent Black man. And again, this is the thing that I believe set off that store owner and set off those police officers, was seeing George Floyd being this good, clean-cut brother, taking care of himself, taking care of his business, having money in his pocket, and just being a decent brother. That upsets a lot of people, and people don't understand that you upset people not only on the right, like these far right people, but you also upset a lot of people on the far left, because the far left and the far right, what they want to do is that the far right wants the Black man to be a loser at the bottom of the world so they can feel comfortable about their place in the world. But the far left wants a Black man to be at the bottom so they can have a pet to clean up and turn into their house Negro. So they go out of their way to do things to create these narratives, and they only want hand-picked Negroes in their place because they fear that if a Black man does things for himself and has his own voice, that means he's going to have his own opinions, he's going to create his own plans, have his own vision, and he's going to compete with them. And again, they don't want to compete because competition means they have to actually show up and actually do work. Far side of the fan, the union representative was a mammy. The supervisor I had was a mammy. And when it comes down to mammies, there's nothing you can really do. Plus, I was on probation, so they could do whatever they wanted. So when I was just in a bad situation because I didn't know that things were like that over there. And again, this was in your left-leaning New York and at one of these left colleges, and still I ran into the same racism at that same college. And again, a lot of these Black women that they hire, they put them in place because they're going to be mammies and they're going to go along with the program. And that's the scary part about everything. That's what leads to things not changing, is we have a lot of these baby boomers and a lot of these minstrels out here who are looking to be yes men and just go along with the program in order to keep a job, and instead of pushing back and trying to protect people who are dealing with these racists out here. Now, New York City jobs are they're not bad for Black men, but they're hard to get for Black men because a lot of these people out here, they pretend like they're so tolerant here in New York, but a lot of them are like this Amy Cooper out here. People don't know. People in New York, there's a lot of people out here like this Amy Cooper who have these opinions regarding Black men. And that's what makes it next to impossible for brothers like myself with college degrees to even get jobs, because the only people who they want to get on the jobs are these yes men, these bootlicks, these brown nosers, these guys who will just sit there and go along with the program. But somebody who does not fit that narrative and won't go along with that smooth world, they have a problem with, because they want they want to be comfortable, because that's the thing that these racists on both the left and the right want to be, is they want to be comfortable at their job. They want to be able to feel like they are secure in their job, and they don't want to see a hardworking brother, because he represents, again, competition. And none of these people really want to step up. They want to stay in their place. They want to be able to go out here, do their job, and make this money and not have any challenge. So they don't like black men coming into the job. And some of these white male bosses don't want black men there because they fear that they'll attract the attention of the white women. And that's not the case with me at all. I could care less about these white women. Not even worth my time. And I'm here to make paper. I'm here to get paid. I don't care about these white women, but that's the notions that they have regarding black men. So you have a lot, again, when I looked at all of this place at Minneapolis burning, I saw the powder keg building over the last 8 years. And I saw this powder keg, and I said to myself, this is going to come to a very violent, especially with this COVID-19. These politicians didn't understand what they were creating. They didn't understand the powder keg they were exacerbating on, because we already had frustration from all these black men being murdered by these police and these beta male vigilantes like George Zimmerman. But we had an even worse situation with the economy and COVID-19. And nobody, as I see it again, has any sort of vision for where they want to go. And you have a lot of disingenuous politicians just talking out of two sides of their mouth, but not really understanding how bad things are. They don't really they just don't have the long-term vision to see you're just making a bad situation worse. And they only charged Derek Chauvin at the last minute when they saw that police precinct get burned down, and they saw that these people were really getting serious about, they're really getting serious out here. And that's what they don't understand, is people are really serious, and they're trying to use the Derek Chauvin charge in order to try to pacify people. But they don't understand that's not enough for people, because people, again, they are suffering, they are hurting. And if you don't find a way to heal the American people, this is not going to end. Because, again, when you have a powder keg and it blows up, that explosion, it rocks areas all around, and they're not understanding that this it's not just about black people. This is about, this is a lot more, because people feel like they're having their rights taken away. They feel like they may not get their rights back. And in the case of these militia types, like the ones who marched up on Gretchen Whitmer, they're ready to fight. And again, they don't understand how bad things are. I mean, a lot of these politicians are just sitting there, we're just nonchalantly dealing with this COVID-19. We're nonchalantly not understanding that people's lives are at risk. I mean, that's one of the reasons we needed to restart the economy, because we really don't understand that our economy is consumer-based and it's service-based, and people, if they don't have a job, they're not able to pay their bills. So we're seeing worst case scenario, civil unrest, because people just they're not taking the big picture and taking it seriously. I took the big picture seriously when I started to see the lockdowns come on, and I said to myself, again, I keep saying it because it just scares me to see the worst case scenario in my imagination coming to fruition. I said, we are going to see, a hot riot if we do not go out, if one of these black men winds up getting killed by the police or assaulted by the police. And it took 3 incidents to set off the powder keg because, again, you have people sitting in these homes all day. They're frustrated. They're angry. Some people have not gotten their unemployment yet. I mean, some people are still waiting for their unemployment. People are getting these notices of eviction. People are hot out here. And these politicians, it's like, no, you need to get on this. You need to get serious, and you need to make things a priority, because if you don't help we the people scarily may be coming to these state houses. And again, we have politicians who are still trying to deal with race relations from a Jim Crow approach. And that Jim Crow approach, again, of just trying to let black people burn out and then going back to business as usual and continuing the codependency, that's not working anymore, because we have a new generation of black people who aren't like the baby boomers, who aren't caught up in Jim Crow. I mean, a lot of these millennials and a lot of these Gen Z, they are not interested in hearing these narratives, and they don't know the old codes like people like myself. No, they didn't grow up with those codes, and they have bought into the concepts of post-racial, and they have bought into the concepts of integration, and they believe they are supposed to have rights like everybody else. So the people don't really understand in Washington, and these state houses don't understand that the next generation of black people is not like the baby boomers and some of the Gen Xers, because many of the Gen Xers, we already know how bad things are. But the millennials, Gen Y, Gen Z, they grew up with a completely different perspective on things. And a lot of them are getting tired of this nonsense as related to this, political chess game where they play the same game of musical chairs, where they tell you, oh, we've charged this guy, and then he goes to trial, and then he gets acquitted. That game is people are starting to get onto that game and see the game for what it is. And again, if I look at this whole George Floyd situation, again, this could be the start of something that really leads to change, because people are just tired at this point, and people, again, they are just so deeply frustrated at this point, because again, you have people losing their jobs, losing their businesses, losing their homes, and you have politicians who just aren't listening, and you have politicians who want to talk at you, whether it be Donald Trump on the right who talks at you, Joe Biden on the left who talks at you, not understanding that serving we the people means you listen 90% of the time and talk 10%. And when you're listening 90%, it's about you delivering tangibles to those constituencies. And most Americans are seeing a country that is not delivering tangibles to them. And because they don't see any tangibles being delivered to them, that's why they are demanding action right now, because these riots and protests are about demanding action, because they tried talking to their candidates, they tried talking to their congressmen, they tried talking to people, and those people, instead of listening to them, want to tell them either one, what they want to hear, or two, they want to make an excuse. So they don't want to listen to the American people. And again, when you don't listen, people start to lose it, because people said, oh, we elected you, and we elected you to represent us. And instead of representing us, you want to go out here and do your own thing. And we have been through this cycle numerous times with these two parties, and it seems like nobody has their ears listening to the American people. I do believe that there is a correlation between the Bible and what's going on here, because he talked about wars and rumors of wars and nations against nations. And well, the United States right now, Trex, it's looking like it's a nation divided, and it's a nation that's, again, looking like it's on the brink of a civil war, because when I look at this whole mishandling of George Floyd's murder, the mishandling of COVID-19, we see a clear disconnect between your American politicians and we the people. And we see politicians who just have a listening problem because they refuse to hear we the people. I mean, they're just sitting in their enclaves, and these elite rich people are sitting in their enclaves, but they're not listening to the people. And when people don't feel like they're heard, they go out here and explode in rage and destroy not their communities this time, because when we look at the picture, this wasn't black people destroying black communities. We saw people of all races in Minneapolis. We saw primarily white people and non-black people tearing up that Target. We saw whites and non-blacks tearing up those stores. So this isn't just a black promotion. This is something else that's going on. And this is something that people really need to think about. We have again, so many people angry about the state of this country because they feel like the country isn't serving them, and they feel that the country is not looking out for them. And that's driving a lot of the frustration, that's driving a lot of the anger. And the politicians aren't listening. I mean, I hear them, like Andrew Cuomo here, talking at people, but not talking to them. I mean, I remember watching a conference. He had these old celebrities, Chris Rock and Rosie Perez. And I'm like, those people were from 30 years ago. You're not, and you have them talking about putting on masks, but people are frustrated. I mean, how about you talk to some of these business people? How about you talk to these small business owners? I mean, how about you talk to some of these people and figure out what they need and how they can get their businesses back up and running? But it's all about them and their bubble. And again, when you have a bubble, eventually it pops. And when people come out of the bubble and come into reality, that's when they get freaked out. Because when you have to come into reality and see the real world, that's the thing that terrifies them. And I have a feeling that many of our American politicians and even our president, they are in these bubbles and they don't understand the reality of what's going on with the American people. And they don't understand the struggles that American people are going through. Because when I look at George Floyd, again, I see myself, and I see a brother who, after losing his job as a security guard, was doing his best to make ends meet, a brother who was doing his best to keep the money flowing. I mean, this man had just paid his rent about a week ago, and he was looking to relieve a lot of the stress he had by picking up some cigarettes. And this man was just day. So a lot of people don't understand that this brother just trying to get through a day, and he loses his life. And a lot of other people see not only George Floyd, but they see themselves in George Floyd. They see that, that things are getting worse, and they see that instead of them getting support, they're getting harassed and terrorized, and they're seeing a lot of abuses as related to their rights. So they see that, for you to murder a man in the street over an alleged counterfeit $20 bill, this is just this thing that set a lot of people off, because again, this was willful and intentional murder as I saw it in that video. This was about murdering a man and taking his life just because this guy felt he could do it. He felt he could get away with it. He felt he was protected. He felt he was supported. And this is this thing that has people angry, is that this so-called law enforcement officer had been enabled to do this, and he was given a pass for over 19 years to continue to do this. And to be given a pass for 19 years, that's extremely troubling to me. I mean, this man got a pass for murdering George Floyd. I mean, he got a complete pass, and they were looking to give him a pass. I mean, not they give him a pass for all the brutality. That's what I meant to say. They gave him a pass for 19 years of brutality, and they're trying to give him a pass for murdering George Floyd. And again, that's where people said enough was enough. And to do this, again, the timing of it, that's related to the pandemic and the lockdowns, this is what, again, further fanned the flames and led to this grand explosion. And people on both sides of the political aisle, they really, really need to, as I see it, one thing, pull back a lot of these restrictions as related to this pandemic, because that's what I believe is stoking a lot of the flames and the frustration. And they also need to really take a serious evaluation of police policy, because police policy is no longer about protecting and serving the people as many people see it. They see it more as themselves being terrorized by police, especially black men. We see it as being terrorized because we don't know whether an interaction with police will lead to us losing our life, because what we saw with George Floyd was a lynching being perpetrated right in front of us. And again, the lynching was done because this black man was presenting an image of black masculinity that Arab store owner didn't want to see, and those white and Asian police officers didn't want to see. And when I listened to his white girlfriend sit there and talk about how she wanted forgiveness, it just shows me how out of touch she is as related to racism. I mean, she's sitting there talking about we need to forgive, but this, as I see it, isn't this extremely egregious behavior. We cannot forgive this. This man needs to be held accountable for the crime he committed. This man needs to be held accountable for the actions he participated in, and he needs to be held accountable for the life he took. I mean, he needs to be held accountable, because even if he worked with that man in that club, he knew that taking a man's life was wrong. And he knew as a police officer what the procedures were, but he decided not to regard those procedures because he thought he was above the law. The same way George Zimmerman thought he was above the law. And again, because our United States President, Barack Obama, did not want to set a line in the sand and let both of those men know that nobody is above the laws of our Constitution. This is why this is the unwritten precedent set as the law of our land. And we need to change that precedent, because that precedent is something that is extremely egregious, just like the conviction of Bill Cosby was egregious. This legal precedent is that our country is setting right now from 2009 to right now. It's taking us back to the dark days of Jim Crow. I mean, when I look at the legal precedent set by the acquittal of George Zimmerman, the pass on Darren Wilson, the complete travesty of justice as related to Eric Garner, and what happens with Bill Cosby, I see us being taken back to the dark days of Jim Crow legally, because when I look at these judgments created by these individuals, these judgments are taking us back to the days of Jim Crow, and where a black man lived in fear of losing his life practically every day, and practically lived in fear that one interaction could be his last day on earth. I mean, this is the precedents being set by our courts and our criminal justice system. And this precedent is a very scary one when I think about it, because we were supposed to have gotten past this with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. How did Bill Cosby get on this? Because that conviction of Bill Cosby was set the legal precedent of trust and believe. And that precedent of trust and believe is what is used by women like Amy Cooper to go out here and get black men killed. So when you have a legal precedent being set up that makes it where we don't have due process under the law and somebody can get justice, this is what leads to people like Amy Cooper dialing 911 and leading to a black man possibly being murdered. So people can't really connect the dots as related to Bill Cosby, but I connect the dots as related to Bill Cosby because each thing that they did, giving George Zimmerman a pass, led to the legal precedent being set up where a black man's life didn't matter, which was block one, and the conviction of Bill Cosby on false sexual assault charges set up block two, which was establishing trust and belief. So you've got to connect the dots as related to how these things work. And the murder of Ahmaud Arbery also sets up another classic Jim Crow block where these suburban terrorists believe that if you are in a place they don't want you to be, they have a right to murder you. So each of these actions, they all connect together, and they all connect together towards restricting the rights of black men and taking us back to the days of Jim Crow. So you have to connect the dots as related to these incidents and how they affect not only the laws of our land, but our unwritten social rules as related to how black men conduct themselves. And when you take a critical examination of these unwritten policies and these policies of laws of the land, they are regressing as related to black men's civil rights, and they are about restricting a black man's rights to something that a white man believes he does not have to regard. So if that's what I want people to understand about these policies that are being done and this disingenuousness that is done by these politicians, whether they be these white leftists in Minneapolis or these black leftists in Baltimore, as related to Freddie Gray. This is all about putting the black man in his place, and that place is at the bottom of society, where he's supposed to be this buck dancing, bojangling, fraidy cat coon, and this fraidy cat coon is supposed to be scared of losing his life, and so scared of white people that he's scared to go out here and live his life to the fullest. That's what this is all about, making black men afraid of going out here and competing, going out here and working hard and looking to get the crumbs from the master's table instead of going out here to build his own bakery and bake his own food. This is about breaking the black man down. And again, that's what George Floyd's murder was all about, breaking a black man and murdering a black man because he did not fit into the smooth world of your Arab store owner, nor did he fit into the smooth world of those white and Asian police officers. He didn't fit into their world or their narrative, so they decided to craft a new narrative around this black man as a justification to take his life. So that's what I want people to understand about all of what happened with George Floyd. And these riots, they were a perfect storm getting ready to happen. And what's really scary is our politicians are still not heeding the storm warnings, and they're not looking at the weather models. And because they're not looking at this storm can do to American society. I'm going to wrap up tonight's stream. I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. And if you want to see me do more live streams, you can donate to my Cash App by clicking the links in the chat. And I also write and publish positive black fiction. And I would really appreciate it if you guys would, pick up one of my positive black fiction books, like ISIS, the Main Event, which is available on Kindle and paperback. And I'll leave a link to that one in the chat. So, and I also appreciate if you guys would pick up John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, which is also available in paperback and Kindle format. So I also have other books as well, but those are the two books that are in the 2020 SJS Direct catalog. And thank you, Mr. J. I also have that one. Trying to get 10 sales on John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, latest book in the John Haynes series. So I really would appreciate it if you guys would pick this one up. It's also available on Kindle. Both of these books are available on Kindle Unlimited, and if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read them for free. I have other positive Black fiction books like Easting the Sands of Time, which is like a Disney princess story. And I have The Man Crisis as well. So I have a lot of great positive Black fiction which presents positive images of Black people and presents you positive stories about the African-American experience. And I also do nonfiction like The Man Crisis, which gives us some insight into the dangerous behaviors of males out here as well. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream, and I hope you'll be there for the next stream.